One question that we always ask young people is what do you want to do, or what do you want to be when you grow up, right? The other day I was thinking about this, about how we ask, very young children, like 3 and 4, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I thought it'd kind of be funny if everybody, like, once you claim that when you're 3 years old, that if you had to be that. I know that at like 3, I wanted to be like a fireman, and then I also want to be an astronaut later on. So I have a feeling that that's not an uncommon thing, that we would have a lot of astronauts, a lot of firemen in the workforce. If you had to claim when you're 3 and 4 years old, what you wanted to be. But even as adults, and maybe you've said this too, even as adults, I hear people say, when I grow up, I'm gonna do this, or I want to be like you when I grow up. There's this idea that there's gotta be something else out there, right? There's gotta be something more to life. And I'm not quite sure what drives this, but I think part of it has to do with how easy it is to go through life without realizing your purpose. It's easy to go through life without seeing meaning in what you're doing. And I get this in a big way. I think back in my own life just a few years ago, where I went through a season where I wasn't really sure if I even wanted to keep being a pastor anymore. About 7 years ago, I was pastoring in a different town, a different place, and we were trying to figure out how to live into our vision that God had given us. We had this bold vision of that God was calling us to reach and to help connect families with the love of Jesus. I mean, this is like the mission of the church, and this is what we were trying to do. And to make a long story short, we ended up launching a new way of being church together, really planting a new church in our congregation, something called a Messy Church. And what I want you to know, it was wildly successful. And within just a few months, we doubled the number of people who were participating in the church's ministry on any given month. And it was a powerful way of being the church together with people of all ages and stages of life, and just different people sharing the love of Jesus with them. And these were people that had no other connection to church until they started participating in church with us. And it was powerful just being the church together, and we kept seeing success and reaching new people, and others began to notice. And people started calling me and asking me, what were we doing differently, or what was happening in our church that we were able to reach these new people. And I got involved with a national organization that was leading this ministry, and began to kind of talk with and help other churches to think about what they are doing. So not only just making an impact in my own local church, but then making an impact in churches beyond my church. And then I was invited to come to Knoxville, and where I shared in a room of about 250 people about the good work that God was doing, the life-changing work that we were participating in. And in fact, I think some folks from this church were at that gathering. And this led to more conversations and more connections of people wanting to engage and to learn. And I thought, maybe I'm building kind of a platform that I can be able to help other churches with and to share with. But here's the thing, that gathering in Knoxville was in January of 2020. And if you were starting anything new in January of 2020, you know what happened in just a few months. And in just a matter of a couple of months, the whole world shut down due to COVID. And while much of the ministry that we were engaged with at the time continued, this new ministry that was taking root, that was connecting people who had no connection to the church before, that was really building disciples and helping people becoming connected, it disappeared. Really disappeared overnight. And it was heartbreaking in the midst of this. I had poured so much of my life into it, so much of who I thought I was into this ministry, and into kind of this platform of trying to share it and help other people start it as well. And when this was gone, I felt just a sense of loss. And if you were living, if you remember back to those times, I know most of you probably do, you might have experienced a loss, a feeling of loss, a loss as well. And in the midst of this, I felt that that I had lost a lot of my purpose in life or just purpose in general. And like so many other people during this time, I had a little bit of extra time on my hands, and so I started reevaluating, who I was and what I was doing and what I wanted to do. I pursued other job opportunities. I interviewed for a position I thought for many years might be my dream job. None of these things ended up working out, and just for different reasons. But I learned something about myself in the midst of this. That as I kept searching for meaning and purpose, one of the things that I discovered is that I didn't need to leave where I was to find purpose. That all I really needed to do was just look around me, just look right around me to find that purpose. Maybe you found yourself in a similar position. Maybe you've asked yourself, what am I supposed to do in life? What I do really make a difference? Do I need to do something bigger to really matter? And people search for meaning and purpose in different ways. Some people are chasing careers and always looking for that next job, the next promotion. They think if this thing happens, I've made it. I'm really going to be able to make a difference in this organization or in society. Some people, you're raising kids right now just trying to get through the day and trying to get to school and practices and appointments and wondering if it'll ever be enough or it ever feels like it's enough, like you make a bigger impact. Or maybe you're an older adult and you're in this stage of life where you're not sure, you've lived a lot and you're not sure what purpose you might have left in you. I know that many people that I've spent time with who are later, like very much later in life, oftentimes that they end up asking, why am I still here? Why has God left me here? And they struggle finding purpose in this stage of life. And it's really easy to believe that if you're not doing something extraordinary, or if that your health is failing you and not cooperating like the way that you want it to, or if you don't have the right job title, that somehow you're not living on purpose. Somehow you're not living with purpose. And then that leaves so many people struggling to try to find and search for purpose. And maybe that leaves you looking for purpose in your own life as well. And here's the truth. God knows that you and I long to live with meaning, that we long to live with purpose in life. And today I want to tell you about a time when Jesus showed up and talked to somebody about their purpose. And if you have a Bible and you want to follow along, I'm going to be looking at the book of Luke in Luke chapter 5. And the book of Luke, it's one of the books of the Bible that tells the stories of Jesus. It tells us about the life and the ministry of Jesus, who he was, how he lived, and what he did to make an impact in the world. And early on in Jesus' ministry, one of the first things that he did is that he invited people to follow him. He invited people to walk with him and to become his disciples, people that were his closest followers, people that would later change the world in the name of Jesus. And he calls them to himself. And the story that I want to tell you today is the story of Peter. It's Peter's story, this guy named Peter. And before Peter became a follower of Jesus, Peter was a fisherman. So this is the story in Luke chapter 5, beginning in verse 1, where we read this, that one day Jesus was standing beside Lake Gennesaret when the crowd pressed in around him to hear God's word. Jesus saw two boats by the lake, and the fishermen had gone ashore and they were washing their nets. And Jesus boarded one of the boats, the one that belonged to Simon, also known as Peter, by the way, and then asked him to row out a little distance from shore. And so Jesus then sat down and taught the crowds from the boat. And so here we see that Jesus is standing beside Lake Gennesaret, which is another name for the Sea of Galilee, which is located in the northern region of Palestine at the time. And he's standing there teaching the crowds, and people are pressing in on him and pressing him towards the water. So he's running out of room. He's about to make it into the water. And so he sees these boats. He's like, well, if I get on these boats, I can, the crowds aren't going to swim out to me. So I can be on the boats and I can still teach people and talk. And so he sees these fishermen who had been fishing all night long. You fished at night on the Sea of Galilee. There's a whole bunch of technical reasons why I won't get into. But these men, they They were tired. They were folding their nets. They were packing things up, ready to go home and rest. But Jesus asks them and gets into one of their boats. And the boat that he gets into is the boat that's owned by Simon, also known as Peter. And he asks Peter to row out a little bit from shore so he can keep teaching. And now at this time, Peter isn't doing anything special. He's just doing his job. He's tired. He's ready to go home. He's been out all night fishing. He's probably hungry, ready to go and rest. But yet Jesus shows up and meets him right where he is. So let's look now in verse 4, where we read that when Jesus finished speaking to the crowds, he said to Simon Peter, "Row out a little further into the deep water and drop your nets for a catch." And Simon replied, "Master, we have worked hard all night and caught nothing, but because you say so, we will drop our nets." I mean, Peter was the fisherman. Jesus was not a fisherman. Peter was the fisherman. He was the experienced fisherman, and he knew that when you're fishing with nets in the Sea of Galilee, the fish weren't going to show up in the daytime because they could see the nets. And so they needed it to be dark for them to catch the fish. They know that there's no fish to be caught. They've been fishing all night. They're hungry, ready to go home. But Jesus shows up and says something unexpected. It says, "Toss your nets out again." And he asks Peter to try again. Now, I can only imagine what's running through Peter's mind at this time, as in this moment. He's probably thinking, what is this guy doing? I'm ready to go home. I know he's been teaching some. That's good. But Jesus wasn't a fisherman. And so Peter's probably thinking, what does this guy know about fishermen or fishing? And still, though, Peter had been impressed by Jesus somehow, and he relents, and he says, because you're telling me to, I'm going to drop these nets one more time. Peter doesn't have it all figured out, but Jesus meets him right where he is. And Peter chooses to trust and obey anyways. And so all Peter does is he takes this one faithful step, just one faithful next step, and responds to Jesus' invitation. And what happens next is something amazing. And down in verse 6, it says that they dropped their nets, and the catch was so great that their nets began to break. And so they signaled for their partners in the other boat to come and to help, and they filled both boats so full that they were about to sink. And when Simon Peter saw the catch, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Leave me, Lord, for I'm a sinner." Peter and those that were with him were overcome with amazement because of the number of fish they caught. James and John, Zebedee's sons, and Simon's partners were amazed too. So Peter, he takes a chance on Jesus, and the results are overwhelming. I mean, the catch is so large that they're almost sinking the boats. The nets are overflowing, and at that moment, something shifts for Peter. And he experiences Jesus in a personal way. It's not that Jesus was just teaching the crowds. It's now that Jesus was speaking to Simon Peter. And he experiences something, and Peter realizes that this is no ordinary man. And so he falls at Jesus' feet and calls him Lord and confesses his own unworthiness. But instead of pushing Peter away, Jesus does something different. And this continues in verse 10 where Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will be fishing for people." And as soon as they brought the boats to shore, they left everything and followed Jesus. So Jesus, he tells Peter, don't be afraid. And then Jesus takes Peter's existing skills, his existing backgrounds, and gives him a new purpose in life. Now, he doesn't tell Peter that he needs to become someone else. Jesus doesn't tell Peter he needs to become someone else. Jesus doesn't tell Peter that he needs to go off on some type of search for meaning somewhere else. Instead, what Jesus says to Peter is that your work can have eternal significance. Your work can have eternal significance. And he says from now on, you're going to be fishing for people. Now, this was originally written in Greek. And in the Greek, there's a specific word that is used for fishing for fish. Fish that you're going to catch and then gut and clean and like cook. I mean, that's what you do with fish. And so some of the early criticism was like, well, if Peter is supposed to be fishing for people, well, that's not really a good analogy because you don't want to eat people. Like, that's not something you want to do. But the word that is used here in the ancient Greek is a word that's not meant for fishing for people. It's the word that is used for catching alive. And so the idea here is that Jesus is not just asking Peter to catch fish. Jesus is asking Peter to catch people alive, to bring people back to life, people who are struggling, people who are alone, people who are not sure which way to go in life, and that Peter is going to be the person who is going to catch them alive, to bring them into life. And it's this idea that so many people are walking through life in darkness and suffering and loneliness, and they're unsure which way is up and down. And Jesus invites Peter to catch them alive, to gather people in, to help people experience new life in Jesus, and to help people experience hope where there had only been hopelessness. And that's the point. Jesus is telling Peter, you have a purpose. You have a purpose. And that purpose is to help other people experience the life-changing love of Jesus. And Jesus isn't asking Peter to change who he is. He's giving his work eternal significance. And that same invitation is for you. So what does this mean for you? What does this maybe mean for me? I think one of the things that Jesus is calling Peter to, and what he says to you and me, is that finding purpose in life isn't always about going out and finding something new. Finding purpose isn't always about this search to find something outside of yourself or find something new. Finding purpose isn't about getting that promotion. It's not about landing that new job. It's not about constantly looking around the corner and trying to figure out, what's next, or where should I go next. Instead, it's about Jesus' invitation, an invitation to influence people for him right where you are. An invitation to catch people alive, to influence people right where you are. You don't need a dramatic shift in career. You don't need to become a preacher or a missionary, because Jesus is already at work in your life. And God invites you to influence people for Jesus right where you are. Remember, Jesus told Peter that he was going to use his skills as a fisherman. But now, instead of catching fish, he would catch people for new life in Jesus. And Jesus invites you to do the same. So I want to invite you to start thinking, what skills do you have? What relationships has God given you in your life? What opportunities has God already put in front of you? Has God already given you? Because God can use these for his purposes. Here at Kern Church, we always talk about being a church of people helping people belong, grow in faith, and make a difference. And the kind of influence that happens in this vision of people helping other people, it's stuff that happens on a one-to-one person basis. It happens when one person helps one other person find Jesus. It happens when one person helps one other person find belonging. It happens when one person blesses another person right where they are. For example, it's the teacher who realizes his classroom is a mission field to positively influence the lives of their students. Or maybe it's the business leader who sees her workplace as a place to reflect God's love, displaying the love of Jesus and how she treats others, or even helping that coworker who is struggling and maybe inviting them to church, not in a pushy way, but offering a place and a space where they can find encouragement and can find support. A few weeks ago, we had a big vision planning meeting here at the church, and we're going to share more about that in the weeks to come. But someone who was at this meeting, shared a conversation that they had with a coworker just a few days before. And they were, just having casual conversation. What are your weekend plans? I mean, that's kind of common, conversation for us to have. What are you doing this weekend? And this person was sharing that they were having this conversation with somebody. And they simply said, I've got a really big church meeting coming up this weekend. Now, if you were going to ask me to fill in the blank about what comes next, it would be, man, I've got a really big church meeting this weekend. Dang it. Like, I got a really big meeting coming up. Dang, I can't believe that I got this really big meeting coming up. But no, instead, this person, she said, I've got a really big church meeting coming up this weekend, and I'm really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it, to see what God's going to do in the midst of it. And just this simple phrase, I'm really looking forward to it, opened up a conversation for them to have. And this person they were talking to, I don't think they go to church, and they might be looking for a new church, and just opened up this conversation. It wasn't preachy. It wasn't over the top. It opened a door, though, for a conversation about what their church meant to them and for this positive interaction to happen. You know, sometimes living on mission and living with purpose is as simple as being open to opportunities and being ready to share about Jesus when the time is right. You have a purpose, and you have a mission, and that mission is to catch people for life, to invite people to know the love of Jesus, to help people experience real transformation in their lives. You know, maybe for the stay-at-home parent, that means discipling your children, displaying Jesus in your interactions, teaching what it means to follow Jesus. Maybe for somebody who's in retirement, it means using your time to invest in other people. Maybe that means serving at the food bank that we offer, helping others receive what they need. Maybe it means spending time in community and being a listening ear to someone who just needs a friend. I promise you that no matter where you are in life, God has a purpose for you. God has purpose for you. And even if your health doesn't allow you to do everything that you want to, that you used to do, even if you can't lift heavy boxes at the food bank, or even if you feel like your best days, man, they're behind me, God's purpose for you is the same as it was for Jesus, or the same as it was for Peter, to catch people to life, to invite people into the life-changing love of Jesus. And all this does is it requires you to look around and to see your world as your mission field, to view your daily interactions as opportunities to live for Jesus. And you don't have to have it all figured out. I mean, you really don't. Peter didn't understand everything. If you keep reading the Bible, you find out Peter really didn't understand everything. Peter didn't understand everything at this time. All he did was he cast his net out again. And he listened. He just listened, and he took one faithful step. And that's all God is asking you to do, to take one faithful step to live into God's purpose, to make an impact in the lives of others. And imagine the impact that we could have, that you and we could have together, if each of us saw our daily lives as part of God's purpose. Imagine the difference in your workplaces and in your homes, in your neighborhoods, if you saw them as places where people could encounter Jesus through you, through me, through us. Because I believe this, Jesus is stepping into your boat. Jesus is stepping into your boat just as he stepped into into Peter's boat. Jesus is stepping into your workplace. Jesus is stepping into your home life. Jesus is stepping into your neighborhood, and he's inviting you, cast your net out. Just cast your net out. Just take a chance. Live into God's purpose. And that doesn't always mean preaching a sermon. In fact, most of the time it doesn't involve preaching a sermon. It doesn't mean forcing conversations, but it does mean living in such a way that points people to Jesus. So here's my challenge for you, is to ask God to show you one person. Just this week, ask God to show you one person. And this doesn't have to like a stranger or something. Just ask God to show you one person. Maybe this is a neighbor that you haven't yet got to meet. Maybe this is somebody that you interact with and on a daily basis, but you've never had a deep conversation with. Just ask God to show you one person, just one person that you can encourage, that you can invite, that you can share faith with. Just one person. And ask God to reveal your purpose for that one person. And if you're here today and you feel like God is doing something in your heart, and maybe you're thinking, I'm not even sure that I'm ready to ask someone else. I need God to do something in my heart. And if that's where you are, I want to invite you to pray that today, to say yes to Jesus today in that way. So whether you're ready to step out in faith and to live your purpose in your home, your neighborhood, your workplace, or whether you're just ready to receive that purpose from God today, I want to pray for you. I want to invite you to pray with me. And as we pray, I want to encourage you just to ask God, if you don't know that person yet, just to ask God to reveal to you that one person that you can have an interaction with this week, that one person that you can encourage, that you can invite, that you can share faith with. And maybe it's not in a big way, but maybe it's just saying, hey, this is going on, and I'm excited about it. That one person that God's going to put in your path. So right now I want to pray for you as we get ready here. God, thank you so much. Thank you so much that you give us purpose, that you give us a plan. And I want to pray right now for everyone is here that you will give them work with purpose, that you will help them see their life and wherever they are, whatever stage of life they're in, as a life that has purpose in you. And I want to pray especially that you would help each one find that one person, that you would put on our hearts that one person that we can have an interaction with, that you can have an interaction with, to catch for life, to encourage, to strengthen, to bless, to lead to your life-redeeming love. And it doesn't always happen at once, and it doesn't necessarily happen in one grand sweep, but just reveal that one person, God, and help us to take that next faithful step. Lord, I give this all to you. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.